Hello, and welcome back to Homebrew. Today we're going to be recapping our Session 4 for the Call of the Hunger campaign. And we're going to be preparing for our Session 5. Now, the last thing that we did is we had our characters meet up with Jajan, one of the lieutenants of the Deerman tribe of the Walund. And he basically said, hey, we'll give you guys a hall pass in these woods if you go and do this quest for us. And essentially, all it really was a quest to go and fight some skeletons in a dungeon, right? And basically an old cairn that had fallen apart. And we devised some plot to kind of feel some of the background. And what was really interesting is that we saw in this last session, the characters really took to the text that we prepared, with these spirits having been embalmed by their old predecessors, and they were old warriors. And they actually reached out with their language skills and were able to communicate with the undead and try to silence them and calm their spirits without combat. So that was very beneficial. I thought that was a really awesome and rewarding feeling for me as a DM, just to have prepared some stuff rather than been like, hey, here's some skeletons, just squash them, right? What I hadn't really thought through was that these skeletons were supposed to be in some crypts, and they were going to pop out of the crypts and be like, rah, right? Well, it didn't really occur to me that they could just pop out at any moment in time, so why would they be back in the crypts, right? So I thought, well, maybe they're stuck in them and they need these people to open them up for me. And then it occurred to me, why would the players even bother to open up the sarcophagus while they're down there to begin with if they know there's a bad guy in there, right? So there's a little bit of a floundering session going on with that, but it worked out really well with the players still. We had an opportunity to use a mimic, which is a creature created through basically druidic powers local in the local forest known as Carnation. And I think that we had an awesome opportunity to basically have a little bit of exposition built in and get the characters curious about what's going on in Carnation. One thing that I was so focused on was I was thinking before the session started, we have to have our first hunger check while the characters are sleeping. That's one of the main mechanics that's going to drive the campaign, is what's going on with these hunger checks and whatnot, right? And I totally forgot about it when the moment came, as I was excited about what was going on with the cairn that the players had just defeated. So a little bit of a misstep there. I just said, hey guys, sorry, you're just supposed to do some couple checks for me as you're sleeping, and I gave a little bit of subtle text there just to kind of get them a little bit hand tilted there so that those guys could start catching on what's going on there. And, we'll remember it a little bit more going forward. So that went pretty good, although room for improvement, right? When they met with Tondu last, I really liked the voice that I picked for this pig guy, but unfortunately it was super scratchy on my throat, and we struggled through it. And at this point, it had gotten a little bit later into the session, and I think the players were starting to, having an exposition dump on them was just going to be a bit rough. We've been having a lot of exposition dumps lately, and so what I did is I let the character kind of explain what he was doing, and then I just backed out a little bit, and I explained as a DM, kind of in summary, what he was suggesting. I would have liked to have much more detailed, first-person experience with these characters interacting with each other, but it just wasn't the right time for it, unfortunately. So I felt like at the time that we were doing the scene in Injustice and Watandu Last as a character in Injustice, and unfortunately, because having a less time with him means that he'll be less memorable for later, I was a little bit worried about that, but it felt appropriate at that point to kind of sum up what was going on. And some of the players, Emery specifically, was asking about her fetch quest. He said, go talk to the Timbermen. They'll be able to help you out on that. We did successfully drop some of the what was going on with Watandu Last, trying to summon some of the other factions, and we did remind the players about the fact that they had a potential quest to inform the Queen of the Bug People, essentially, that their gang in Lemoore was doing them a solid, so that way maybe they can go get a reward, because the leader of the Natari tribe is what they were, or Natari gang, is counting on them to inform him. So we did mention that, so start pulling our characters in different directions. One thing I forgot to mention is that, I wasn't really comfortable with Emery just going straight to Bula Rao and getting her request and then leaving from there. I thought that would be awfully convenient that he was on the way and that he would have all the information for Emery. So I decided to include a character named Figured who they could meet along the way, who's going to be heading to the Druidic, or the Keeper of the Dryads kind of convention where they're all going to talk and discuss whether or not they're going to accept Wotan Galast's offer or not. And so I just basically made a quick little quest for them to head out that way. One thing to note is that our characters are healing up nicely after having a little bit less serious of combat. So they're healthy, they're getting ready for another combat. I created a combat between here and the next situation. And what we can actually just pull that up. All I thought is, we'll throw them against a couple of trolls, and then have the trolls be eating one of the memory trees that we'd mentioned before that were essentially producing meat-esque fruits. And so I thought this would be a nice opportunity for our characters to feel a little bit stronger. We had a pretty nasty combat at the very beginning, which really harmed one of our players. I think that he's getting to the point where he might be able to test for some of his critical injuries and get healed, which will make sure that, we'll have to be cognizant of not severely critically injuring him in the near future for combat, because we just really don't want to stomp on that player's parade, right? As the main combatant, he had his damage nerfed, he had his soak nerfed, his defenses nerfed, his movement nerfed. It was really bad. So this is something to keep in mind for our next session as far as just quality gameplay for our players. But these guys shouldn't be too hard for them to fight, but it should be enough with their healing factor that it'll give the characters enough of a fight that they won't feel like I'm just feeding them something really easy, right? Moving off of that, one thing that I did is I plotted out where the Buckums were, where the Deerman tribe, or where Wotan Galast was, where they're going to meet up with Figured, and where they're going to meet up with the rest of the Timbermen in relation to the Bracken Bastion and some of these other areas that they're thinking about heading out to. So that way we can give them dates as far as travel distances, etc., to move through there. And then what I did is I just incorporated that into the notes here, so how long it's going to take and where to put the encounters, etc. But here's the thing: once the characters set off, they meet Figured. They set off. They go towards Figured, and we just said some basic, hey, head towards the great winding root of the pine and go to the thicket lands from there and check for a fork at the maple, yada yada yada. They're gonna run in. They're gonna fight these trolls, because the trolls would be at the earth side of things and not super high into the trees. They need to get all the way up into the canopy, which is like up these massive trees so they can see out and over. They'll be able to see a hill with a bunch of blossoms on it, and that's where they're going to find Figured. Anyways, they defeat the trolls. They meet up with Figured. Figured says he's going to head down and meet up at the Nexus, which is where all the other Timbermen are going to be. And then the players are probably going to head there, since Emery wanted to figure out how she could find the tears of a willow tree. Well, with them being so close to the Bracken Bastion, after they leave the Nexus, we don't know if they're going to go to the Bracken Bastion or if they're going to be going to, for instance, to pursue Emery's side quest more, right? Because she also really wants to make sure she protects her brother. Just to kind of bring you guys back up to speed on some of the other side projects that we've had on developing this campaign that are really going to come to fruition now. Just so we got a little bit of a exposition on some of the other background things that we've been working on for the campaign. And so now we can go to our notes that we've made of the Bracken Bastion, which is just a little bit below. So we've got these information on the Carnation. There's another druid at the Nexus who's going to ask for side quests for feathered filigree moss, which is something that they can pick up from basically through Lamore and through the Chettle Corporation, which we've name dropped in Taking Root. So we've got another side quest there. Then if they choose to head off to the Tekeknu, which are the bug people, they will have the opportunity. So down here, just a couple of days, they will have the opportunity to turn in that reward. And then we made a side quest here. Hey, help me with my. They're gonna run into one of the bug people. He's gonna say, hey, there's some stuff afoot. The queen's a bit crazy. We're overcrowded. I need your help smuggling out another queen egg. And so now we can start pulling in some of these things that we've already prepared while we were kind of ahead early on with some of our preparation, right? Same thing with Bracken Bastion. If they choose to go to the Bracken Bastion, they're going to meet basically the head of the Bracken Bastion is this Rothradine guy, which we'll just make up on the fly. They're going to meet up with Xi. Xi is going to have a fetch quest for you to go find her lover, Hanubo, who has come back from a fight. Basically, he went off to go find a Profane, which is essentially a monster, an Eldritch monster. So now we've got some of these other opportunities. And what I think will happen is that after the players play this next session, I'll ask them, hey, as you're leaving the Nexus, I hope for them to get to the Nexus, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to Paratisium? Do you want to go to the Bracken Bastion? Do you want to go to to where Bularau sends you to fight the willow trees? What's up with that, right? And so then we have all of these opportunities from there. So I'm not going to prepare more. I'm not going to start making some of these combat maps for where you're going to find Hanubo or where they're going to fight the willow trees until my players tell me what they're going to do, because that's starting to get exponentially harder to prepare. But we're also making a world now where our characters have much less railroading and they have a much more opportunity to move around. I also started to think about, at this point, what about some of our far extended plans for the campaign? What are our characters in the background doing, right? We mentioned that we're going to have to meet up with Leanne and Shay. Well, she knew about some of the stones that were in the background of Emery's background story, right? So how did she know about those? Started to think about that. I started to think about, how we're going to rope in the family of Wretch Braventail. We know they're in the area. So we decided, at least I decided, that one of the sons, Bundy, is going to be with the Stillin tribe. The Flayun tribe. And that if you come across the slaves, or the bug people that have been captured, you will find someone, a Rattan, that knows about the Braventail family, right? And if our characters are going through and doing this sort of Paratisium bug people quest, the guy's going to ask you to free some enslaved bug people from the Flayun and go and try to help establish a new colony away from the Siln tribes, the Flayun tribes. And as that happens, our characters are going to run into this other link to Wretch Braventail's background story. I also started to think about what's going on with the Dajong from our Iliad's background story, right? So we started giving him a name. I think I named him... actually, I don't know this name right off the top of my head. I'll have to take a look at his background that we... this is why you have to have really nice in-depth notes. It's so nice. I could even control F and search it if I wanted to, but I think it's going to be right here. Chemo. What's going on with Chemo? So we started filling out the background on that. I know that he's going to be a prisoner of the Flame Tribe, that there's a portal now at the Eye of Azrael that he's going to lose them at when they start asking him about the stones he's carrying. I started to figure out, where is Cinder, right? So he's sick somewhere. Well, if the characters find Chemo, or if they find the tribes, if they go up to the tribes in the north, then they'll be able to find out that Chemo saw Cinder head north. If they go talk to the tribes in the north, they know that Cinder has kind of like a sleeping cave in one of the trees, a big bowl of one of the trees that he's going to be at. I also know that our character, Leanne and Shay, knows where Cinder's at. And we figured out, too, underneath the hunger, underneath the parasites and Cinder, we know that, when we find him, what do we do from here? Well, there's some opportunities so these are some links, like I mentioned, for the plot leads, to get you to him. Cures. Okay, how are you going to start curing him? Well, we have an opportunity to use Leanna Shea and her weird science, kind of eldritch connections to do some experiments on Cinder. We can use the Chetel Corp notes from the weird thing that died up in the Crystal Tarn. Maybe they can do something about it. And so what I decided is, let's think about the very nature of this thing that's infecting Cinder, that's causing the hunger to get out of control. And I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to have this thing feed off of sorcery or creatures that are innately magical. And that's what's going on with Cinder. So, other gods, if they try to intervene, are going to start getting sick, right? So I decided, you know what? It would be too easy for our healer paladin guy to just say, hey, god of healing, cleanse Cinder, right? So if she touches it, she's going to say, oh man, I can't heal this. This thing hurts me too much. You're going to have to use some other way. So science is going to be the way I decided. There's going to be opportunities for like superheating it and killing it that way, or looking into, and there's many different routes, but basically our characters are going to have to figure out, do we trust Leanna and Shea after all of this stuff that we've gone through, or do we want to figure it out on our own, right? And so another thing is that maybe this creature, which also I decided came from we've got some really good material, right? So let me back up real quick. The creature is some sort of infection. It's feeding off of magical creatures. From our background notes, we know that Chetel Corp had wildly unstable materials, and we have that there's a creature of the abyss in the Crystal Tarn that died. So I started thinking, why don't we have it where essentially the Chetel Corp, not Chetel Corp, sorry, what was their name? Yeah, we got it written down. Plot leads, origin, here we go, boom. Mastercraft Tectonics were dumping their material that they were using to create essentially linkages. So basically like how to make like a robot arm work with your nerves. They're dumping the volatile materials into the Crystal Tarn. Okay? And if they're dumping those into the Crystal Tarn, that's basically what caused that thing to die eventually. And when that thing died from a nasty parasite, some sort of weird infection, that floated on the White Flow. As it floated on the White Flow, it ended up into the woodlands, and that is what Cinder caught. He got sick from it, and that's what you guys have to deal with. So, long story short, we'll think a little bit more about how the characters cure it once they figure it out and are attempting to cure it, but we already have a couple of routes in mind, so that way we don't hit a huge plot failure when that time comes. So, from here, we have an opportunity for the war, the climactic battle between all the different elves, or Wooland in my case, fighting with what's going on with the Paratisium and the Timbermen. But we have a moment for our characters to pursue some side quests and decide whether or not they like certain factions over another. And so I think that's all going to work out. So we got some material for our next session, and then we've probably going to have, after that session, we're going to ask our players what would they like to do, and then we're going to start preparing from that moving forward, because then we're going to ask them, we're going to prepare some material for the next session, they're going to get through it, we're going to ask them, where would you like to go now? And that's how these characters, we had a lot of railroading at the beginning, a lot of exposition and information. They're starting to ask me about it, I'm starting to sum up and kind of let them know what they know. And now they're going to start to take the reins and start moving forward, I think. So I think this is a great position for us as a DM, and I'm curious to see where this goes. So tune in next time for session 5 of Call of the Hunger, and then I will see you again for our next session for preparation as well. Once again, as I said before, and I'll always say, if you have questions, throw them in the comments. We'll get to them. We'll make sure that if there's anything that I haven't covered in the prep session, I'll cover in the next prep session, or we can just respond in the comments section. Thank you.